Welcome to the Unknown Webcast. While we are raising our mission support, I have a part-time truck driving job to supplement our income. I did have to let the company know that sometimes it may take me a bit longer than others to get places where I'm going because I am so conservative, I cannot turn left even when I'm driving. This is broadcast number 48, and James Walker from Watchman Fellowship is going to join us to talk about the Shack and the Atheist Christian Book Club. And now I'm completely befuddled and bewildered getting myself going here. There I am. Too many screens going on. My name is Don Vino, and I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who, when he joins us, will talk about our sponsors. He seems to be having some technical difficulty getting in here tonight. So, James, turn on your microphone and let's talk.
Hey, Don, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I understand you're at a, should we advertise the place? A coffee shop.
A well-known brand,
well-known
mermaid coffee.
A mermaid coffee.
I call it the Mission Field.
I think it is a mission field. Isn't he the one who said, if you're conservative and you believe in traditional marriage, we prefer not to have your business? Or something to that effect?
Something along those lines.
Something along those lines. So,
but it's a great place to get gospel conversation started.
Boy, it is that. It is that. And they have sufficient Wi-Fi to do stuff, obviously, unless you take your own little hotspot, which is what I do.
I have a hotspot with me as a backup.
Well, I take mine because I don't want. I want to make hacking into what my little resources more difficult, if at all possible. Okay, so James Walker, you are president of Watchman Fellowship, correct?
Correct.
And you hate Mormons? No, you don't hate Mormons. you were a Mormon.
I was a Mormon.
You were a Mormon. In fact, you have a tract out, don't you? I was a Mormon.
I have a tract that I wrote many years ago, back in the mid '80s, for the American Tract Society, and it stayed in print until the American Tract Society went out of business about maybe 5 years ago.
Okay.
And last time I checked, they had sold over 750,000 of them, and I still get calls from my phone number on the back of that track from time to time. But there was a time it was like several calls a week I was averaging off of that pamphlet.
Wow, that is terrific. And you are also on the board of directors for Evangelical Ministries to New Religions.
Yes, which it has having a conference here just in a couple of weeks.
We are the end of April. It's up here in Palatine, Illinois. And of course, people can go to our website, www.emnr.org, and sign up. It's going to be a really good conference, and we're looking forward to that. So tonight we're talking about two things: the Shack, more the film, I think, than the book, although probably need to touch on both of those. And the other topic is the Atheist/Christian Book Club. The Shack, very popular, the book has sold over 20 million copies. And
almost was never published.
And almost was never published. And I heard a debate a week ago, Saturday, on WMBI on a program called Up for Debate. I think you may still be able to listen to it via podcast. Between the pastor/publisher/partner for Paul Young on the book, and he was trying to defend its theology as orthodox. And Norm Geisler and Dr. William Roach were raising the theological issues, saying why it is not orthodox, one of which is universalism. Now,
Yes.
You had mentioned that it sort of is downplayed in the book.
Well, I would love to have seen the first draft, the whole background story on the Shack. It's a metaphor what happens in this shack. I don't know how much we need to go back and, without any spoiler alerts, give the background of the story and why it's so popular. You want to do that first, or?
Yeah, I think so. We don't have to give the end of it.
I know a lot of people have already seen the movie or read the book, but a lot of our viewers maybe have not, and they're wondering what all the fuss is about. The Shack was a story written for Paul Young's kids, actually, and it talked about a time of great crisis that he went through. He tells it as a story from somebody else's eyes, but basically, he had an affair with his wife, and it was discovered, and it was her best friend, and this infidelity and subsequent angst that came out of their relationship, and really his whole life. He'd also been, he was a missionary kid who had been sexually abused by some of the nationals on the mission field, and this final thing created a crisis in his life, that he basically had a complete change about who God was, and his understanding of God's love and the church and the purpose of life, everything through an 11-year period. So he gets out of that and feels like he has a real breakthrough. And so he decides, so his children can understand where he was and where he is, he would write a novel. And it was really designed just for his kids, photocopied, at a Kinko's or something. So it basically told the story of another man who went through a crisis, Mac, in the book The Shack. And what ended up happening is that Mac's daughter is kidnapped, presumed dead, and Mac is devastated. And so what happens is he gets angry with God. The book ultimately, and even Paul Young, the author's life, is a lot dealing with resolving the problem of evil. And so how could God allow my baby, my daughter, to die and be kidnapped like this? And so in his middle of his anger against God in the novel, Mac gets a letter from God in his mailbox. And the letter says, "This is God, I miss you, meet me at the shack." The same shack where his daughter was killed, out in the middle of nowhere. So he's, is this a trap? Is a murderer sent this to him? He doesn't know. But anyway, the book and subsequent movie tell the story about what happened as he goes to meet God for 2 days at the shack. And it's a very emotional story. I mean, I tell people to go, I don't care if you're a grown man, you better bring some tissue. It is a
story well told. There's no doubt about it. I was gripped emotionally as I read it. But
the movie, it comes across also very emotional. The movie, I think, maybe even more so. It's pretty true to the book. I don't know how much of a spoiler alert we want to give or this, but there's a certain twist at the very end that I didn't see coming when I read the book. And then as soon as I saw that, I thought, this is an obvious movie. And of course, it took a number of years for that to happen, but it does make for a very entertaining movie.
It does. Someone had said that Al Gore went and saw the movie Lincoln. And at the end of the movie, he when he's walking out, he said, I didn't see that end coming.
I didn't see what?
That end coming. Okay.
Surprise ending.
Surprise ending, yeah.
Yeah.
So Ron has joined us. So why don't you hold your thought there a second? And so Ron can do his, who's our sponsors and what's the weather like?
Okay, I need you to give me a moment here, because what I'm doing is I'm using Internet Explorer now, and everything looks different. Is it supposed to look this different? I
have no idea. I never use Internet Explorer.
Well, anyways, let me see how this works. Yes, greetings from sunny Florida, and we will give you our sponsors tonight. We're going to start with the Coexist Boutique for when you care enough to take your hands off your loved ones' throats in order to pick out the perfect gift. And two great faiths that taste great together, Reese's Jesus Buddha Cups. So those are our sponsors for this evening. And both of your mics are off for some reason. Now
we're back.
Now you're back. Okay.
We didn't want to bother you, especially James, because he's in a public place there. So
is that the background noise I'm hearing, James?
Yeah, there might be. I'm in a coffee shop, so I'm on the mission field right now.
Ah, I see.
Expanding our audience.
Expanding, but Mormons won't be in there though, but others will.
Yeah.
Okay, so so that is kind of the backdrop of the book, and then the movie follows pretty true to the book.
Yeah, it does. It's obviously a lot left out to make it fit into a movie, but it captures the spirit. That guy, the guy that plays Mac, Tim McGraw, I was surprised because I was like, well, they got this singer. This isn't going to work, but he actually does nail the role. He was very good in the film.
Okay. Now, obviously, there's a ton of controversy surrounding the book. You have, let me back up. It has been interesting to me reading the reviews, because the secular reviews are pretty much not in favor of the film, or they're contrived. It is too Christianese. It is kind of typical stuff that you would.
Too much God.
Yeah, too much God in it. It's getting 2 stars, 2.5 stars, whatever. Christian reviewers and viewers tend to love it, and they're taking it as sort of an evangelistic tool, taking their unbelieving friends there, or going themselves to have their faith strengthened because they've had life crises, and they feel like this gives them answers as to why God allows things, or maybe it doesn't, but it makes them feel better about their situation. So you have you don't really have anyone that's neutral too much. It's either they love it or they hate it. And on the evangelical side, then you have evangelical scholars and pastors who are going, heresy, heresy, stay away. So what say you, James Walker?
Let me tell you, the dilemma I have, I just kind of wish it had been either all bad or all good, because then it would just be so easy to say, hey, I can recommend it, let's go watch it, or just say there's nothing at all redeeming in the whole thing. But unfortunately, like many things in life, it's just not a full black and white. There's no doubt the evangelicals, Tim Challies, other reviewers, they're right. It's full of heresy. And that's what I don't like. The thing that I think makes it popular, it's dealing with what I think is the biggest challenge to Christianity, and that is the problem of evil. Now, I believe that atheists have a more difficult problem with evil than Christians do, but Christians have a problem explaining why do bad things happen? Why do we have not just people doing bad things to people, but we have natural disasters, tragedy, innocent children dying, and when it happens, and especially if it happens close to you, you're going to be able to identify with Mac when his little girl he loves ends up being kidnapped and killed. And you're going to ask that question, why does God allow this? Or maybe even ask the question, is there a God? I mean, and what I liked about the book and the film is it resolves that issue. And the bottom line is, if you could sit down with God for 10 minutes, or in this case, 2 days, and sit down like Mac did and meet God in the shack and sit down and understand where God's coming from, you would have no problem with evil. It would be resolved in God's favor. So I think that's why some Christians do find value, they find grace, they find redemption in the movie and in the book, because it does resolve this in God's favor. Now, the bad news on the shack, in order to get there, Paul Young, the author, has destroyed virtually every Christian doctrine to get there. So bottom line is, at some point when you're dealing with evil, why do children die? Why are there floods and catastrophes? Ruined relationships? You're going to get around to asking about the biggest question, the biggest evil. Why is there a hell? And what happens is, Paul Young in the shack resolves that by, you learn that there really is no hell. Ultimately, everybody, whether they like it or not, will end up in the presence of God.
So he's a universalist.
Yes, but it's tricky. It's a specific kind of universalism. And so Paul Young has gotten on the talk show circuit and he says, I'm not a universalist. What it is, it's Christian reconciliation. It's a type of universalism. Now, Paul Young would not say all roads lead to heaven, that you can go the Buddhist way or you can go the Muhammad way, all roads lead to heaven. He would say there's only one road that leads to heaven, that's Jesus Christ. However, everyone, whether they want to or not, will go down that road because Christ died for the sins of the whole world, and there's enough virtue in the atonement. That means ultimately, in fact, he doesn't even tie Jesus and salvation even into the atonement. In his more recent book, Lies We Believe About God, Paul Young equates the cross with child abuse, that God allows his son to be killed, and that's like a child abuse. So in some way, God's love overrides.
So he's gone kind of the way of Bishop John Shelby Spong in his view of the crucifixion, that it's heavenly child abuse.
Yes. So the crucifixion would be seen as an example of evil, but not something that God found redemption in. So it's the love of God that overwhelms and relationship that overwhelms, not the cross, not the crucifixion. And so, but ultimately the bottom line is everybody, including the man that killed his daughter, Missy, God loves. And because of that, regardless, they will be in the presence of God, and they're all on the path. Every one of us, all of humanity, whether you're Adolf Hitler or Mother Teresa or you're Billy Graham, we're all on this path of redemption, and ultimately we will all end up in the presence of Jesus.
So the cross, Paul Young does not deny that the cross happened, does he?
No, in fact, in the shack, he has a thing which has drawn some criticism. What happens at the shack is God appears to Mac in three persons. Right. So you have God the Father, he calls Papa, who's a large African-American woman. Then you have Jesus, the Son, who appears as a younger, like Mid-Eastern looking carpenter. And then you have the Holy Spirit appearing as a woman, like an Asian woman, Syria. So you have the three in one, and they will communicate with each other. And when he was asked about the crucifixion, in fact, in the Shack movie, he specifically asked Papa, why did you abandon him? And Papa, she answers back and says, I did not ever abandon. That you're mistaken, Mackenzie. And then she shows her wrists to Mackenzie, and she's got the stigmata. She's got the crucifixion marks. And so it was the Father also was in some way, according to the Shack, also crucified with the Son on that cross. And maybe the Holy Spirit too.
So the fact that the Father is called Papa, but it's a woman, is that some kind of gender dysmorphia thing going on? What's happening there?
I don't know what his motive was on that. I think probably not. I think I'm guessing, but I think his motive was to just shake up stereotypical concepts of what God would be like. So the book didn't bring this out, but the movie did, that when his nominal Christian alcoholic father who beat him, Mackenzie in the book, when he was a kid, there was a neighbor woman that helped protect him and took him in and showed kindness, who happened to be a large African-American woman, same one that appears to him as God. So maybe it was a way of saying you find the face of God in people you least expect to.
A couple things. You remarked that the Father suffered with Christ. That's called Atropassionism.
Yeah, Tertullian, I think, is the one who coined that term, and it's a form of modalism. The idea that there's not three persons. I don't like the way he tried to portray a Godhead. I really don't think that Paul Young was trying to promote modalism, because he's clearly showing everywhere in the book and the movie three distinct persons, not the same person under different modes. So I think it's an unfortunate analogy, but I don't think he was trying to teach modalism.
Yeah. One of my complaints, and you and I have talked a little bit about this, Jonathan Miles and I, Dr. Jonathan Miles, one of our associates, and I have spent a lot of time talking about this issue. He's currently trying to author a book himself, and that is that Christian authors tend to not write these days really great stories. At one time, they were the leading, literary out there, but not so much these days. Their characters are kind of flat because either they are not capable of painting a picture of how an actual person really lives, or the church won't allow them to do that because, a real person might say bad things or think bad thoughts or take bad actions, or even an evil character who you assume will act certain ways. You can't really write them that way because many Christians would reject the book on that basis. That's unfortunate, because what Paul Young has done is he's written a story that is compelling because you have real life kinds of characters in it.
It's an honest guy, the hero of the book, Mackenzie. He gets mad at God, but it's understandable. And whether we want to admit it to ourselves or not, we've all had times when we've leaned a little bit towards Mackenzie being, angry at God. Or that day might come when we will go through our own time of darkness. And so he does strike that. That's one of the cool things about the Bible, is these are not just black and white characters. These are multifaceted, real people. You find King David, who slays Goliath, who's a man after God's own heart, who falls with Bathsheba and ends up committing murder. And you don't find that kind of thing. It's like too real to be fiction. A person who's a real person who struggles with both the good and the bad.
Yeah. One of my concerns, and I don't know how you or Ron feel about this, but it seems to me like too many believers today, those who are Christians, get their theology from novels, which kind of leaves them with just a novel theology.
Or TV, movies. It's powerful. It's a powerful medium.
It is.
I think, Ron.
What do I think? I stopped reading fiction about 40 years ago. My wife, I wanted to be a science fiction writer when I was a high school kid. And when I became a Christian, it just totally changed everything for me. All I wanted to do was study this Bible and learn as much about it as I could. And I sometimes feel like I'm missing something because, well, not everybody I know if they read fiction, that they're not necessarily reading the latest Christian fiction. They might be reading, Flannery O'Connor or, the Tolkien trilogy or something. And I pretty much put all of that aside. So
maybe Don's right. There's not a whole lot of good Christian fiction to choose from.
Well, I mean, I've started to read things. I've read a little bit of Dostoevsky. I've read a little bit of, I can just say every once in a while I dip my toe. There's a tremendous amount of really good fiction that is being, I doubt that the average person who reads Christian fiction has read the Brothers Karamazov, or some of the things that there was a, I don't know, 20 years ago, Christianity Today or Leadership Journal or somebody asked all these Christian leaders, if you were stranded on a desert island, which top 10 books would you take? And of course, everybody had to list the Bible. Or it might have been without the Bible, I don't know. But, you had these great classics of literature in addition to great classics of Christian devotion. I had to admit that I had not touched any of those literary books. So should we be, I guess I feel a little ambivalent about the whole thing. How important is it really that we have really good Christian storytellers? I wouldn't be unhappy if we did. I'd be grateful. But is that a priority right now?
I'm kind of with you on that. It's just like I have enough nonfiction stuff I should be reading. Do I really have time to? It's like a splurging my time away, on something just for pleasure's sake of reading fiction. What do you get out of it? the truth of the matter is, fiction speaks to the whole person and can communicate things sometimes more powerfully than just listening off a set of facts. We switch gears. I think this is why the shack is so important when we talk about this. If you go back to James Redfield, I think was the author of the Celestine Prophecy, came out, I think, in the early 90s or something. He had written an earlier book, which is like 12 truths that he had learned in life, and it's basic New Age stuff. All is one, and one is all, and you are God, and it's a list of kind of New Age. Of course, the book didn't do anything. What he does is he rewrites it as an adventure, a fictional adventure, cast in the Peruvian Andes, where you have a life and death situation when the hero has to find out, risking his life to find out what happened to the Maya and why did they disappear. And what he discovers in this chase scene and going from village to village, and he discovers those same principles he wrote in the book. Well, that becomes a New York Times bestseller.
Fancy that.
Exactly. And so, in a sense, what you see in Paul Young's new book that just came out last month, the Lies We Believe About God book, is basically setting out the doctrines that you find more subtle, but they're pretty clearly there in the book The Shack. And that is that that basically everyone will eventually go to heaven because of Christ, and that church as an institution is not something that God is in favor of. He's about relationships, not institutions. And basically the list that you just go down the list and see that come out more subtly in The Shack. Fiction's powerful.
It is powerful, but it's basic, it's basic emergent church kind of dogma. The church as an institution is not a good thing. God is all about relationships. By the way, everyone is eventually going to get to heaven because there really is no hell.
Yeah, but if you just list those beliefs out, who's going to accept them? Well, you've got to spin a story to slip it in, and the story your guard is down, and you find yourself so hoping that this guy McKenzie gets his life back together. You're so sympathetic for him. You end up accepting some of the, if you're not careful, you accept some of the heresy because you've all wrapped up in the story. Because
it sneaks in. See, I spoke at the International Society of Christian Apologetics last weekend, not this past weekend, the weekend before. And the topic I had selected was stealth, how false teaching creeps into the church through our publishers. And if we start looking at the various media that's in the church, supposedly Christian media, what you soon discover is a lot of the heresies that Christians come to believe comes from, Thomas Nelson publishers, because it's Gwen Shamblin, Benny Hinn, and so forth and so on. Even Christianity Today, which is, generally a fairly solid publication, was very supportive of Dr. Murray Harris's view that the resurrection was not physical. That's heresy. So I have argued that most Christians get their theology by osmosis. In fact, most of us do that. We come to believe what we believe based on the friends that we have, the institutions we're part of, the books we read, the television or movies we watch, and we eclectically pick up things. Yeah. We're not even sure where it came from. We just start believing certain things. And if you press somebody on, why do you believe that? Oftentimes, they're not sure. They don't even know where it came from.
How did you come to that conclusion? That's a good question to ask somebody when they're giving their theology.
Right.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. A lot of times it wasn't thought through. They didn't think through it. They just, that's what their friends said and it sounded good.
Well, in fact, as we talk about that, we want to hear from one of our sponsors and see what it is that they think.
Well, they're very concerned about relationships and how we just kind of stop worrying about all these doctrinal hang-ups that we have. So let's talk about some questions here. Like, do you struggle with finding the right wine to bring to pagan goat sacrifices? Do you wonder what to wear to your neighbor's neo-Nazi parties? Do you get anxiety attacks when trying to find the right picket signs to share with your friends from Westboro Baptist Church? Well, now you can put an end to all those worries that come from trying to fit in with people on opposing sides of the culture wars. Now you can find the perfect gift for any ideology at the Coexist Boutique. You know, right now they're running a special on those glory days of the Cultural Revolution in China. You know, when they would drag the professors out of the universities and pull their eyeglasses off and stomp on them. Only our special deal is Cultural Revolution eyewear, genuine smashed Chinese prescription lenses, frames dating back to the 1976 Cultural Revolution, 99 cents a pair. 99 cents. You can't beat that deal at the at the Coexist Boutique for when you care enough to take your hands off your loved ones' throats in order to pick out the perfect gift.
Perfect gift.
The perfect gift. And
yes,
there
I always
go.
struggle. I always struggle with that. Next time I go to a pagan goat sacrifice, I'll know where to go.
Where to go, yeah.
So in the meantime, you know, if you look back, if you read some of the pastoral literature of the 19th century, J.C. Ryle and others were kind of concerned about how many Christians were basically living so much of their lives in popular novels. There was a lot going to the theater and living their lives. I mean, back then, of course, there was no TV or cinema, but a lot of Christians went to the theater quite a bit. And what bothered these pastoral writers was that Christians were like living in this alternate reality of fiction and other people's stories. And we still have that problem today. There's no, I sometimes maybe some of these authors went too far, you know, and there was a lot to be read, or a lot to be gained from reading Dickens and things like that. But I have a feeling that in the 19th century, they had just as much, you know, bad literature back then as we do today. A lot of just garbage was out there on the market. So why aren't our people reading, I don't know, like systematic theologies? Why aren't they reading? I mean, there are plenty of lay-level books these days that deal with the topics, and people should eventually graduate into a little more difficult stuff. But the average person, I shouldn't say average, but so many. We have a high number of people who really are. Just look at I get the CBD catalog. I don't see one laying around here, but that fiction section's pretty thick.
Yeah, maybe part of it's marketing. You know, it's like you want to read. You know, these things are very easy to read. You know, it's not hard to digest as you reading a book on philosophy or theology. And it says Christian on it. You know, it's coming from a Christian publisher. It's got Christian on it. You know, you find that with the Sarah Young's works. You know, the Jesus calling material. You know, which how many kinds of Jesus calling books are there now? I saw one at Mardell's Christian bookstore, Jesus calling for toddlers. You know, so it's coloring book and stuff. So it's like every kind of sub-market you can imagine.
Right, and then you have the heavenly tourism books.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I went to heaven and had a water fight with Jesus at at the Great Heaven theme park or whatever it is. It's just now to Ron's question. It's good. I think it's a reasonable question, but the answer very likely is that because we're all so different, we process information differently. We have different interests. Not everyone, you, Ron, like to live in the world of ideas. And I have watched you as we're working on a project sort of meander off down various paths because something interesting popped up in your research on a main theme that we're working on, and I might lose you for weeks at a time.
Weeks.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm talking about is we've got a Christian. Okay, we've got a whole Christian romance genre. Then there's a Christian mystery genre.
Christian sci-fi.
Christian sci-fi genre. I like all the. I mean, I would like probably the sci-fi genre myself if I were reading, but it's. I guess what concerns me is how some people don't. I mean, you can make room for that in your life, but I see some people where it's the problem is not how much room do I make for that in my life. The problem is, do I make room for even just reading the Bible in my life?
Right. And that's a very good question. You also have the whole issue of if you're a young family, you have a lot of time invested in, raising your kids and keeping the house up and buying groceries. And these days, most families have to have two incomes just in order to get through, which takes up more of your time. And so God kind of gets relegated to when I have some spare time, I'll try to read the Bible if I have some spare time.
And in all fairness, I mean, you're looking at somebody who says, instead of just watching some reality TV show, I'm instead going to read this book that has God on the title. So in a sense, they're trying to make a step in that right direction. And it's just, where do you even find books that are good? Where do you find the good fiction? Where do you find that it's a lot of it, I think, is marketing. I want to address this issue of fiction a little bit too, because some of the pushback we've had, we published a 4-page profile on the Shack.
And how can people get that?
At our website, watchman.org. They can go there and just under profiles, you'll see we have probably 75 or 100 profiles. One of them's on the Shack. Now, the issue, we get pushback and feedback. James, don't you know it's just fiction? As if because it's fiction, it's not supposed to be true. Therefore, we can say whatever we want to. And why do we say, that's not biblical? Of course it's not. It's fiction. But people don't realize there's different kinds of fiction, and fiction for different purposes. There's, realistic fiction that maybe teaches like vague Christian principles. You find, like Fireproof, the movie Fireproof, or Facing the Giants. Some of those movies are realistic fiction, and they're on a certain level of, they're not teaching doctrine per se, but they are teaching some principles. Then there's foundational stuff, things like the Lord of the Rings, C.S. Lewis, Tales of Narnia. It's getting you're not trying to teach biblical truth per se, but biblical principles again are coming over. But there's allegorical stuff that you have like Pilgrim's Progress. But what we're dealing with in the Shack is what you could call didactic fiction. It's fiction designed to teach a doctrine. Right. And another example of that might be the Tim LaHaye Left Behind series. Yes, that's fiction, but the very purpose of it, no one questions this, is to teach a form of dispensationalism, teach the rapture doctrine, and try to teach that doctrine in a way that's entertaining and memorable. And so you wouldn't say, there's no such thing as the rapture. That's just fiction. Well, he's trying. Tim LaHaye was trying to portray something he really believes is biblical doctrine, and I think that's the same thing we see in the Shack.
I had a friend who she passed away some years ago. She was a Christian teacher in New Jersey back in the 60s, and she assigned The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to her kids. I think they were whatever 5th grade, 4th grade, whatever grade would be. You could just start to read that book. And she said, I had this unusually bright little Jewish girl in my class. And she, of course, all the kids loved the book. But this girl came up to her and said, I just feel like the author's trying to tell me something, but I can't figure out what it is. And she said, here I am, I'm a Christian teacher. I've got this Jewish student, and
what can you get away with?
And I'm in a public school. Yeah. And it was the 60s where there was this new profound awareness of, separation of church and state. You can't even pray anymore in a public school. You can read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and you can, if you're a Christian, you can see what the author's trying to say, but you don't expect everything in Narnia to transfer into systematic theology somewhere.
Right.
Whereas when you're reading The Shack, they're making propositional statements about God, aren't they?
Yes, it much more so than something allegorical like Tolkien's Lord of the Rings or something.
Aslan's not getting up off of the broken tablets and saying, "See, I just atoned for sins, and this is a picture of what Jesus did." Whereas in The Shack, they're making statements about the atonement, right?
Oh, Papa scolds him. You know, you don't know. You just thought you knew me, Mac Mackenzie. I'm not who you think I am. And then goes on to tell about there is no hell and everybody goes to heaven, and it's not I'm not about church. I'm about relationship, not institutions, and this one thing after another. It's not that subtle, and I would just love to see that first edition before they got supposedly tried to write out a lot of the heresy.
And really, this is just a kind of a Christianized version of George Burns playing, oh God, and saying, I don't like religion.
I want to address that too. There's another thing, a power of fiction that I don't even realize what it's doing to me. I think I'm aware of it, so I'm somewhat protected, but really I'm not. When you see something like that, there's something about, especially a dramatic portrayal or a movie, that it sticks in your mind. And I still, when I read Exodus, I can still hear Charlton Heston's voice sometimes from the movie The Ten Commandments. I mean, isn't that weird? But I can still hear that. It's just so powerful.
You're dating yourself.
So I can see people watching The Shack this week. And then 5 years from now, they have this strong feeling that God's a certain way, and they don't remember where they learned that because they don't remember it was at the movies they saw that. But they still are committed to this principle.
All right. So I tend to be an advocate, and I'm not saying everyone should do this. This is just me. But I tend to be an advocate, not of censorship, but rather to, if someone's going to go to the film, for example, A Shack, to go with them. And then you can talk about it afterwards. Here's what they said. Here's what's really true.
Here's the part I like. I think they made a great point here. Here's the part that I think we need to make sure we don't accept this part of it.
Right. Because here's the statement that Mac made, or the author made through Mac, or however you want to frame that. And here's where it fails. I used to, for several years, I would go to Colorado and work with high school students as they're getting ready to graduate high school before they went to college, on worldviews. And part of that is after we spent a day and a half talking about worldviews, what they are, what worldviews are available, and I kept emphasizing that every book you read, every magazine article you read, every film you watch, every TV program you see, the producers and authors are conveying a worldview to you. You don't always recognize it. And so then we would watch a film, get some popcorn, watch a film, and the one we tended to use was Hidalgo, which is a film about a race across the desert.
Yeah.
And there are three worldviews represented in there. And I said, okay, now your task, as you watch this, it's a very interesting film, is to figure out what are the worldviews in the film, and then which one is held up as being the supreme, the best worldview possible. And as you go through it, you have three worldviews. You have a Christian worldview, American Indian animistic worldview, and Islamic worldview. Now, who's the evil character in here? Well, it's the Christian, the conniver, the thief, rigging the race, stealing, whatever. So the Christian is a bad character. You have the Muslim is the honorable character, who at the end tips his hat to the American Indian religion as being the best worldview available.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All of that's coming through the film, but unless you're watching for it, you don't pick it up. You just sort of take it in.
Yeah, I can get excited about Christians doing what you just described. In other words, going to the movies either individually or in groups, and then coming together and discussing it with an open Bible. And
that's not what's happening, though. I mean, I'm with you, Ron. That's exactly the way to discuss. But the truth of the matter is, the theaters are in the dark. and in more ways than one. The lights go out and your mind opens up and it just comes pouring at you, and you're being hit visually, audibly, on emotional, gut level, so many different ways. This movie is powerful.
Well, yeah, and you can talk about that in your Christian discussion groups. That would be one thing to address is, to what extent did the emotional impact of this film tend to override your own commitment to biblical truth, or did you feel it happening to you?
First of all, can you identify where it strayed from biblical truth? That's step one.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can't do that, then we need to have that discussion first.
Right. And so we're gonna turn the corner here, oddly enough, because we talked about, okay, here's what I would do and what I advocate. If a church is going to take people to the film, it isn't an evangelistic film. You should go out to dinner with them afterwards to talk about, here's the highlights, here's what I liked about it, as James said, but here's, the statement Mac made, which is actually not biblically sound. It is in conflict with biblical teaching, which is a worldview question. And so we want to hear from our sponsor, because then we want to talk about the Atheist Christian Book Club. And one of our sponsors kind of talks about this meshing of worldviews and what that might look like.
Yeah, well, you know what? It just so happened that one day Rob Bell was walking along, not watching where he was going, and he smacked right into the Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama said, "Hey, you got Christianity in my Buddhism." And Rob Bell said, "You got Buddhism in my Christianity." And then they decided that it's not all about truth, but experience. And isn't taste just one of the best experiences ever? Two great faiths that taste great together, Reese's Jesus Buddha cups. And that's the message that our sponsor leaves us with. Just remember those as your week goes by.
Making me hungry, Ron.
I know. That's the whole point.
Reese's Jesus Buddha cup, which now brings us to turn a corner slightly, because you have started something which some Christians would be a little fearful of doing, I think.
I am too.
Before we get into this, I want to tell a little story. Some years ago, this is 2 decades ago now, it seems like, I had received a call from a church not too far from where I was living at the time, that said, we need some help. We have about 300 vampires coming to the park on weekends, and we don't really know what to do with them. One of the churches shows up with a bullhorn telling them to repent or going to hell, and they all just kind of laugh at them and walk away. I said, well, have you actually talked to this group? And they go, well, no, we're kind of afraid of them. They're vampires. And so I said, well, let's go talk to them. So several of our folks, we went over and we sat down and we started talking with some of the teenagers. Well, as it turns out, the Vampires is a role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons. It's a political game. Most of the kids who were involved were kind of sort of C students in school, but very intelligent, as we discovered, because they're memorizing vast sections of the books they're reading to do this role-playing game.
Yeah.
And so I asked them, I said, are you learning a worldview? And they said, oh, no, this is a role-playing game. And so I looked at the storyteller and I said, are you teaching them, or what is your worldview? He goes, well, I'm Buddhist. I said, are you teaching your worldview through the role-playing game? He goes, well, of course. They were shocked. So afterwards, actually, 3 of the kids the next weekend came to the faith, and the church asked me, what do you think we should do? And I said, well, I can tell you what I think you should do, but I don't think you will do it because Christians are afraid of non-Christians. He said, what do you mean? I said, if it was me, I would host a banquet. I would not host it at the church. I'd do it at a neutral facility. I would invite as many of the vampires as want to come to the banquet and join in for the free food and give a role play of how they see the church. And that'll give you a place to start from to talk about the faith with them in a different kind of a setting. And the pastor called me back a couple days later. He said, oh, there's no way our people would do that. They're afraid of doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that brings me then to James Walker and something that you have gotten involved with, which, again, many Christians might be afraid of doing. And that is you started a book club, but a particular kind of a book club. What is that?
Well, it's the Atheist Christian Book Club.com. Now, I don't know if I should have put a hyphen in there, or you can't put a slash in a URL, but something, because I'm not talking about atheists who are Christians or Christians who are atheists. We have two groups of people. We have Christians and atheists coming together in a book club. And so we're going to do every month, the first Friday of every month, coming up this Friday, first Friday of every month, we're going to deal with a Christian book, and we're going to discuss it to death. And then the next month, we're going to come back with the atheist book. So our first month, or this Friday, we're going to be discussing Improbable Planet by Hugh Ross. And one of my atheist friends sent me a screenshot of just 2 pages. I think he had more notes in it than the text of the book on those, at least on those 2 pages. But he's taking it very seriously. He's ready to come, loaded for bear, and
ready to rumble.
Ready. I did an interview with Hugh Ross, video yesterday that we're going to play to kind of launch it. Hugh's really very supportive of what we're doing on this, and then probably next month, I think we're going to be doing A Universe from Nothing by Krauss. So we'll see what happens on it. But I've been going for a little over a year to the what they call the Metroplex Atheist, the Dallas-Fort Worth area Metroplex Atheist meetup. I got invited by a guy, Bill, who kind of functions as their outreach director. And they were real nice, and they, hey, come on in. We allow Christians, come on in. And we started some discussions and talked about everything you can imagine, everything from, the source of values and ethics. We talked about the intelligent design. We talked about the, do we have actually free will, or Sam Harris right, that the mind-brain problem. We talked about the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, we talk about other stuff too. But out of that, I've gotten some friendships over the last year and a half, and I came up with this idea. Well, actually, Bill, the atheist who invited me, he's one that really came up with the idea and has been pushing me. Let's do it. Let's get together. Let me get some atheists. You bring some Christians, and let's sit down. So we'll have some pizza, and then we'll watch that little 6-minute video from Hugh Ross, and then we'll start discussing the book. And you say a lot of Christians will be afraid. I'm a little bit afraid myself. I don't know exactly what's going to happen on this, but I think I can learn something, and hopefully maybe they can learn some things too.
Yeah, and I really like this. Of course, you know me. Several of our mutual friends and cohorts have done things like going to the parliaments of world religions and hanging around with the Wiccans and other groups, because I think they're interesting. Why do you believe what you believe? And you can actually develop some relationships with them, and especially if you're meeting kind of regularly with this atheist group, for example, you actually can develop relationships where you care about each other, about each other's kids, sort of, and that kind of stuff.
Here's the weird thing, Don. It's they're obviously on a totally opposite side of the position than I am, but a lot of them, we have an agreement. We agree that these issues are the most important thing. Right. That if there is such a thing as absolute values, right and wrong, if there is such a thing as good and evil, the source of that and coming to a decision of how we know what's right and wrong is one of the most important questions we could address. Now, at my own church, some of my friends, they could care less about stuff like that. So even though these atheists are on the opposite side of the discussion, they agree with me. This is important.
Have you ever seen Tim Keller's DVD series based on his book Reason to Believe?
I have not. I just listened to his book on Christianity and Atheism. I just got through listening to audio of that.
I misspoke. As Reasons for God was the title of his book.
Oh yeah, that's the one. The Reasons for God. I just got through listening to the audio.
Yeah, he well, if you can get the DVD series, and it's totally unlike the book. It is he does what you're talking about. No, he brings people into a room. Oh, and you've got people. I mean, he's in Manhattan, right? He's in New York City, downtown. And so he's bringing all these people, some of whom have come to his church as visitors, but they're either agnostics or atheists or whatever.
Anybody from Princeton?
I don't know.
That's a joke.
I don't know.
Princeton decided not to give him
Yeah.
the award.
Yeah, it's like we like you, but not that much.
Not that much.
Especially after we heard from our other our non-alumni. So
Right. We really like you somewhere else.
yeah, we were. Yeah, that is. I don't even want to talk about that. Well, anyways, it's okay. I really doubt Tim Keller's feelings were hurt when that happened, but I think he was more surprised that they would even think of giving him the award than the fact that they pulled it away from him. So he has these conversations where he just lets them talk, and then he talks. Other people, different people share where they're coming from, and I thought that it was an excellent way of getting Christians and non-Christians together. It's very similar to what you're talking about on the various questions that are covered in his book, Reasons for God. I wish I could remember how all of it went down.
So basically, he demonstrates how you could have a discussion about those very same issues in a live setting, rather than just give somebody a book and ask them to read it. I like that.
Yeah. And, I mean, the Christian view gets across, but then so does the agnostic view. And you find a lot of people nobody really fits into a very specific category. People are very often combinations of perspectives.
Eclectic. They're eclectic.
Yeah, we're eclectic.
Yeah, one of the things that I kind of learned is when I'm just stick with Christians only, when I'm in church, all my ideas sound brilliant. When I get at the bar with the atheists, I find out, hey, some of my ideas might be better than others, because they challenge me on some things. These guys are, well, mostly guys. There's some women too, but I mean, they're well read. They're up on the stuff. They haven't read so much the Christian side, but they've read the Sam Harris's and the Dawkins, and so they're thinkers. So. Yeah. It helps me. I think I've raised some good questions, but they've given me some good questions. I have to tell them sometimes, that's a good question. Let me look around and see what I can. I don't want to answer you off the cuff. I'm almost sure I'd be wrong. Let me look into it and see if I can give you the best possible answer next time we talk.
Well, just to encourage you here, brilliance and persuasion are not always the same thing. And in fact, a lot of what is persuasive is just downright dumb.
A lot of it is just emotional arguments. They're not even logical.
It's the legend has it that Sun Yat-sen, when toward the end of his life, when he saw Mao Zedong coming up the pike, and they just gotten that hard-fought independence from the colonial powers, and now there was going to be a battle between the communists and the nationalists. Sun Yat-sen made the remark that the communists had the better rhetoric, and it was like, okay, son, are you saying that therefore they're better? Or I think he was just kind of prophesying as to which one had the better chance of succeeding with the people, because in the end it was going to be all about rhetoric.
I think we've all seen debates, and
yeah.
The person who wins is not necessarily the person who was right.
Well, if you're into things that kind of more long term, I mean, what you're talking about, the Atheist Book Club, and I two things come to mind for me, just in my past experience. One is I was in construction for 40 years and did construction management 25 of those years. So I got an opportunity to build a relationship with a lot of different sort of non-believers. One of which was an agnostic Jewish guy. Who from time to time would run into somebody who needed a contractor, and he worked for the city, and he would call me up every few months, and he'd say, the first questions out of his mouth were, are you still a Bible banger? I go, of course, Howard, I'm still a Bible banger. Why? Good. I have this client and I told them they could trust you. Because we had built this relationship, this rapport, we had a lot of discussions about God, and about salvation, and about Jewish versus Christian, and all of that. And even though we, I don't know if you've been in a room full of Jewish people very much, but they love arguing. And it would get quite vocal, let's say, but never personal.
Mm-hmm.
And
was,
you know,
it was just displaying passion, not anger.
just passionate, not anger, passionate. You know, how could you be so stupid? You stupid. By the way, what do you want for lunch?
What's everybody kvetching about here?
Yeah, exactly. Another was, I was a general contractor I had worked for. I was a superintendent. He happened to be Jewish as well. And oftentimes we would end up in some religious discussion by the end of the workday. But the secretary never seemed to like me. We worked together probably a year and a half or something. And then she moved. And about a year later, she called me and said, we have to meet for lunch. And I said, okay. She said, I just moved back and I have to talk to you. You're the only one who will understand what I have to tell you. And I said, okay, this is ominous, but okay. So we met. And as we sat down, she said, you know, I have to tell you, I have become a Christian. And I went, wow, that's cool. She said, and I'll tell you why I became a Christian. Because every day you and Bill will get in these long discussions and he would debate you and you seem to be nonplussed. And I did everything I could to try to put you off and make you angry, and you never treated me badly. And after you would leave, Bill would come over to my desk and sit down and say, what if he's right? And that plagued me and plagued me. And when I moved to Florida, I met a guy, I started going to church. It was an evangelical church, and I heard the gospel again. They were saying the same thing that you had been saying, and I accepted Christ.
Wow.
So those things can be effective, but I think what you're doing is you have to have an actual relationship, not one with an agenda.
Well, the other thing is, for all of us that are in ministry, this is occupational hazard. If you're not careful, you're not going to be around people who are not Christian.
Right.
It'll be, I go to work, my staff is Christian. I go home, my family's Christian. On the weekend, I'm speaking in the church, they're Christian. I can go 3 months and not have a discussion of any kind with a non-Christian if I'm not careful. And so you have to do something to get outside the walls, you know, to develop relationships. And when I was not in full-time ministry, that happened kind of naturally at work and stuff, but it's a real problem. And I think even for not paid staff people, we can cocoon ourselves to such a degree. You ask somebody, who are you praying for salvation? And they start really thinking, who do I even know that's not a Christian? Boy, I guess somebody on television or something. Right.
You're exactly right. Well, we'll expect you to kind of come back and let us know how that is going. Perhaps in a future webcast, we're going to have you and your atheist friend on to kind of kick some things.
You'd love to do this.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Really? That'd be interesting. That's a first for us.
Yeah. It would be. It would be a first. You'd have to develop some new commercials so you can pick on atheist.
Maybe I should.
Maybe we'll get him to be a sponsor.
Oh, yeah. Well, I like that. Yeah.
We'll run some of his commercials.
How fun. Yeah. All right. You know what? We're going to be wrapping up for tonight, but a couple of things. If someone wants your profile on this shack, they're going to go where to get that?
Our website at Watchman, M-A-N, watchman.org. On the left-hand side, you'll see profiles, and you'll see 75 or more. We've done 150 probably, but you'll find a bunch of them, and one of them alphabetically is going to be the shack, free download. Then we also have a sermon that I did on the topics available as well. And you can catch me on Facebook and scroll down and find that sermon, James K. Walker 1, the number 1 on Facebook.
Okay.
Every time I hear you say Watchman, I think of the Sony Watchman. Wasn't
Walkman. That was a Walkman.
The old cassette tapes, yeah.
I think they had a Watchman very briefly.
They had a little TV one, too, that was a Watchman, I think.
Did they? Yeah.
Didn't last too long. Fortunately for you, so there's no patent infringement or copyright infringement or trademark.
There was an app for that.
Yeah, there probably is.
All right, so Ron, do you want to walk us out with our sponsors?
Walk out, everybody. Here we go. Yes. Well, Our resident cult leader profiler for our program is Neil before me. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just in Case. Our Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and Dio Poser. Our Mormon Archives manager is Polly Gummas. Our Liberal Denominations Bureau Chief is Lucy Goosey, and our Transgenders Issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Our special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys is OD Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yo Leg Pulling. Your technical assistance comes from Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham & Howe. Our grievance resolutions director is Giovanna Pisami, and our director of privacy assurance is Wiretapping. Original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc., in cooperation with the Emergency Manicure Productions, who are totally responsible for its content, although you will not ever be able to prove that in court. So, here we go.
Here we go. And you know what? Just a reminder, Ron, we have now been doing this just over a year. Do you believe that?
Well, you said our first one was January what of 2016?
January 16th of 2016 or something like that.
Don't you get a week vacation if you've been doing it a year?
Well, we've skipped a couple because I think we've done actually 46 webcasts instead of not 56 or something. But
we must have skipped a few because it's.
Well, we had a couple of technical glitches and that sort of stuff. So
because
you run reruns in the summer.
No. Well, they can rerun it every night. After tonight, they can watch this, like twice a day, 3 times a day if they wanted to.
But that's actually a year and 2 months that we started, and
a year and 2 months.
We only have 46 webcasts, so we must.
Well, we might have more than that. We've got a total of 76 on our channel.
Oh,
not all of them are this. Some of them are snarky apologists talking about Jehovah's Witnesses, and some of them are radio programs from 1995 are going up gradually. So we have a few different things going on there. So
how many years of archives of radio shows do you have?
2.5.
Oh, that'd be good.
Yeah. So
well, thanks a lot, guys. I enjoyed it.
All right. Talk to you all later. Have a good night. And there we go.